So welcome back to Transform Gov, which is part of the Ireland eGovernment Awards, and it's brought to you in association with Accenture. So I'm Maeve Neefsey, and today we'll be continuing an intriguing conversation with Wendy Walsh from Accenture Ireland. So if you tuned into part one, you'll remember the valuable perspectives that Wendy shared about overcoming people-centric challenges in digital transformation. That won't be unfamiliar to most of us, and truly essential listening for anyone driving change of any kind. It doesn't have to be digital transformation, it's just change. So please don't miss that, enjoy it. And it kind of leads us into today because we're going to focus on the impact of AI and in particular on the public sector workforce, which comes with lots of kind of hard edges and worry, but it's, I think, possibly unfounded, right?
Exactly.
And Wendy expertise provides a really practical roadmap for navigating those kind of pivotal changes. So Wendy, when we were getting ready for today, let's just talk about your team because you described it brilliantly, I thought. You said, if it touches a human, we get involved. Yeah. So could you give our listeners kind of a snapshot of the types of challenges you help public sector teams navigate?
Yeah, no problem. I think it's a nice way to describe my job to a parent or a friend. So basically in the health and public sector, if they're deploying a technology, if they're trying to restructure or get a new org, supporting HR, obviously now we're spending a lot of time helping people understand what does AI mean for them. We're also helping them increase their customer experience. And basically, I would say, if I had to put a tagline on it, is reinvent themselves. How do we help health and public sector continuously reinvent itself with the budget that it has and bearing in mind the constraints, but also the expectations of their workers and citizens or patients?
So I suppose I can kind of, I've got two hats on, right? One hat says change, great, could be brilliant, but the other hat, why do I have to change? What does that mean for me?
Yeah.
So what kind of change are you imagining?
So if the future for health and public sector, there's so much. If I talk about Gen AI, which I know this podcast now is more tailored for, 42% of the public sector, excluding health, will be transformed through Gen AI. That's either through automation or augmentation. So there's so much stuff that's going to happen in the health and public sector. And we do know that when we interviewed the execs who are working in the public sector, they believe that their organisation can be transformed through Gen AI. So if we think about it, there's a lot of admin heavy, repetitive, paper-based tasks within the sector. And this is Gen AI's sweet spot. This is where they can sweep them up and really help with those tasks, which really allows employees to focus on more higher value work.
And so I suppose in a way, underneath that is people thinking there must be job losses going to happen.
Yeah.
So how would you answer that worry?
Well, I can totally see why everyone's worried. But I think on a deeper dive, and hopefully after this podcast, people will feel a little bit more reassured, is that this machine or technology can only work with people. It's the only machine or technology that needs input to learn from people. And its true power is unlocked through people using it. So people can't go anywhere if they're the ones that are guiding it or orchestrating it. I would say, though, when it comes to jobs, there are some things that are going to change. So some jobs may not be fully required or as much anymore. And maybe for those tasks that are, mundane, repetitive or transactional, which I know some people mightn't enjoy doing, paper-based, data entry, that can obviously be supported with Gen AI. There will be a requirement to reskill on new roles. And that main thing is, how do we help people collaborate with AI now? And then there'll be new jobs entirely. So actually, notably, 60% of roles today weren't around in the 1940s.
Wow.
So if you can imagine Gen AI now being the next catalyst for these amount of roles, they're going to change much faster than that. So the new roles would probably be around, prompts. If you put into ChatGPT, I could put in a prompt and ask the same thing you asked, but we could do it differently and get better results, one of us. So that idea of having better skills, AI engineers, there's going to be so much new roles. But for most, it'll just be learning how to collaborate with AI.
So I suppose that's interesting, isn't it? Because you're kind of saying, look, if you learn how to collaborate with AI, you're going to be valuable.
100%.
So how do you learn how to collaborate with AI?
Yeah, well, there's a few things. There's some new skills to be learned. There's a term called fusion skills, and these are skills that help you collaborate with AI. There's some ones, funny names now, intelligent interrogation. These are skills that can help you ask AI the questions. There's judgment integration as another skill. So as you can imagine, Gen AI is not always right. Let's get that right first. So this judgment allows you to make sure it's certain and it has no bias towards it. So there's new skills that need to happen, but it is a mindset shift because let's just jump ahead a few years, Maeve. And I say to you, Maeve, will you come in and lead a team of 4 employees, 12 agents and 4 robots?
So when you say agents, do you mean AI agents and robots?
And
Very
they'll be
interesting.
exactly
I'd say definitely no problem.
Yeah. You'll be like exactly those questions. Who are the agents? Are they call center agents? You know, oh no, it's Gen AI. That is the confidence that employees need to have now, is this integration with AI. But it's also the fact that they're the orchestrator. They're the ones that make it learn and be as impactful and powerful as we need it to be.
I mean, I suppose if you pull it back, and I'm very excited about that future, and I hope other people are too, because we have a talent gap in the public sector globally, where there isn't enough people to fill the jobs, and particularly people at a certain level. But if, for example, I think about it on a very simple level, it's learning how to ask questions, isn't it?
Yeah.
So if I tell ChatGPT and I said, look, can you please give me an answer to this problem, but don't use any hallucination or conjecture.
Yeah.
I want a fact-based results. So I now have learned, I suppose, in a way, I need to caveat my question. So is that the kind of ways of using AI that you're thinking about to get more effective outcomes?
Yeah. Other skills would be critical thinking. So you're going to have to think differently now. If you think about it, if a person's job, because 7 in 10 people in Ireland will have a third of their working hours enabled by Gen AI. So what are you doing with this free time? You're going to be using it for stuff that you should be using it for, which is the high value stuff, which is critical thinking, problem solving, creativity. We were talking about earlier on. It's one of the most underutilized skills.
Oh, come on, look, people don't need to be creative in the public sector.
They do indeed, to keep it innovating.
Okay, tell us examples then.
So I'm just saying, I think it's 27% of people we surveyed don't get to use their creativity. Where we're in a world of constant transformation and innovation. We need people to be, now obviously there's people that day in, day out, their job is creative, if you're in marketing or whatever. But it is important that if you're using data, which is a massive skill set as well in AI, is understand data, that you can be creative in what it's telling you, what you're going to use with that data. And speaking of data, if you had said 5 years ago, everyone would need to have an understanding of data, you'd be like, oh, I'm not a data analyst. I'm not a data engineer. It's now our bread and butter. We all need to have a basic understanding of data because that is what Gen AI is built on. And to be honest, you will not get powerful Gen AI transformation opportunities unless you've got good data and a really good, we call it a digital core, which is the right systems and platforms.
I suppose in a way creative thinking is about problem solving.
Exactly.
So if it's put in that way, people say, well, actually, I'm very good at problem solving. Well, you're probably using information in order to inform a decision.
Exactly.
And that's the same thing. It's just data and probably far more at your fingertips.
Yeah.
And far more ability to interrogate the data through Gen AI. So to ask questions, interrogate it.
Yeah.
I've been chatting to a few public sector teams lately, and I keep saying to them, you are doing amazing, exciting digital transformations. And they should enter the Ireland e-Government Awards.
Absolutely. Entries are officially open. If your team's done something innovative, something that has really made a difference, this is your moment.
And you've got until June 2nd to get your entry in. It's such a fantastic opportunity both to shine and also for your teams to shine.
And where to enter? digitalgovawards.com. But don't leave it too late.
And in terms of the apprehension, do you see other ways that the apprehension about Gen AI is impacting on the workplace?
Yeah, it's actually the third biggest barrier to deployment of AI. And ahead of that is cost, obviously, and having the platform or the digital core in place. Like 95% our research says people see the value, but only 1 in 2 believe their leaders are going to do the right thing with it. So it's back to this uncertainty because our leaders aren't communicating. So our research is saying they're not coming out and communicating. What does Gen AI mean for us, for me, and this workplace? Because unfortunately 1 in 3 don't feel like they have the technical acumen to give that change narrative. So we are on a journey. Everyone's at different points on this journey. But I think the leaders will have a massive role to play, as we touched on the previous podcast, on explaining and alleviating the fear, because our survey also said that 60% of people are fearful. However, we do know, because the research is also telling us, that the jobs are going to be augmented. Some jobs might look completely different. For the most part, this is a machine plus human learning tool.
Okay. And when people talk about agents,
Agents, yeah.
Talk to me about agents. What exactly does that mean to somebody, to the uninitiated who doesn't have their own agent?
Yeah. Well, how would you feel if I told you generative AI is nearly old news now?
Oh, I was going to get, that's my next question. So let's go there.
Yeah,
agentic AI. So agentic AI is a new term, isn't it?
It is a new term.
A new kind of discipline in a way. Or is it a new tool?
Well, it's a new type of AI. So
tell us what it is.
Okay, so if we go back to the 50s, there was, descriptive, diagnostic, preventative. We're all the way up now to generative. But now, to be honest, Maeve, the real transformation can be unlocked in agentic. So I think of agentic with the word agent because it's made up of agents.
Okay.
I'll give an example as well of how we're helping a client with it. But basically...
by the way, when we're finished this, let's talk about some practical applications.
Oh, totally.
Otherwise it'll be up here. But carry on, sorry.
But don't worry, it's not. There are some real nice ones coming through here that you'll be like, okay, that does make sense. But for agentic AI, it basically is AI that autonomously makes decisions and takes actions. The human is still the orchestrator, but it's doing a lot more. So let me give you an example. In the health and public sector, research is massive. Agentic architecture, we're helping clients with that at the moment. So just say, Maeve, you're doing a piece of research normally, manually. It could take you, 7 to 10 days to do it. I'm over here with my agents, and I've got 2 agents. And I will tell the agents, I need you to research X, Y, and Z. Agent 1, will you do that? And agent 2, will you check their work? Off goes agent 1, does the research quite quickly. Agent 2 comes in, gives feedback. I think you need more of this. I think you need less of that. It still needs me as a human orchestrator to go and go, guys, yeah, okay, perfect. That's really good. But can you dial up this, dial that down? Go again. I need more research. Agent 1 does the research. Agent 2 checks. This is the power of agentic AI because it can make decisions and take actions.
And I'm guessing that each of the agents has a specialty.
Yeah.
I mean, are they trained to be,
exactly.
Look, you're really good at analysis, you're really good at getting and making sense of basic research. I mean, is that how that works?
That's exactly it. And then back to the human element, they can only be that through feedback and learning and data from the human to tell them what they need to be.
Okay, and that's where the huge amounts of data that government are at a huge advantage to have, because they've been mining data for years and years and years, and now suddenly they can really accelerate their use of it.
Exactly. And if we think of another example, which is practical, handwritten documents, whether letters come in from the public, handwritten notes, we are now helping clients use tools to just turn that handwritten note into digital and into a report. That is saving hours upon hours, which then means, for example, if you're working in cases where humans are involved, you can then quite quickly identify your vulnerable cases. You could identify high priority, which allows you doing higher value work all the time.
Actually, your colleague Brian Rich was on recently, and he was talking about that same scenario where they were working with a large public organisation, I think within health, and they were able to triage basically the most critical. It was payments actually. The most critical payments. So the most vulnerable people who are waiting in a queue of emails that would normally be done. Who came in first?
I know.
And then say, no, these are the ones that are absolutely critical. This person needs to have a benefit of some kind in terms of their health, or they're going to die. I mean, literally, that kind of thing that would get buried sometimes.
Exactly. And as an employee, you can only imagine.
So the agent's doing that work.
The agent's doing that work, but the employee experience is going through the roof now. Because if you're leaving work in that particular example where you're making sure 20 vulnerable people are now going to bed, not worry tonight, what feeling is that? As opposed to mining through all this data and hitting a vulnerable or a high priority case every so often. So it just gives more job satisfaction.
Let alone lack of litigation because somebody got missed.
Exactly.
Which is a terrible fear for people working with very vulnerable people.
Yeah, and that's another thing that AI can help. What we're seeing our clients do is make it run into databases and go, check this, is this correct? It's like a second pair of eyes. I'd say AI is like your toolkit to do your job faster. So if you are doing a job right now in the health and public sector, it is going to be transformed because based on our stats and our research, it will. But it's how you see fit for it. But I'd like to think, for the most part, people don't love the mundane jobs. And they're going to be happy for them to see lifted somewhere else, which means they can do more critical, fulfilling jobs.
And can you share examples with us where you've applied Gen AI within teams and the agents around them?
Yeah. So, for example, I talked about the research. We're using that a lot on different clients now. Chatbots. I know they've been around for a while, but I don't know if
They weren't very effective.
They weren't very effective.
I've seen people nearly kill the screen because the chatbot gives them the same answer.
But they are now evolving so much more. So we are helping some clients even do their onboarding experience through chatbots. But once again, that chatbot is only as powerful as the information that we put into it. So we would help our clients understand that, what they need for new joiners. So there's nothing worse than starting a job and not knowing things. But now if you've got like your virtual friend that you can ask anything to, but it's not going to give you generic content.
And of course, back to that point, the humans have got to give the chatbot the right information in the first place.
I heard an example
and clear out a lot of nonsense that could be either old information or old processes.
Or just generic and not make you feel special.
Well, actually, yesterday, I used ChatGPT to help me figure out how to solve a problem on another piece of software that I use every day.
And it worked.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have to go through a whole load of irrelevant information to get the answer.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, I interrupted you.
Well, just a funny story on the chatbots. I've heard of a client using an onboarding, and it goes, "What college are you from?" And they said Trinity, and they're like, "Well, 35% of our employees are from Trinity." Like that data to reassure that person, I think is pretty cool.
Through the power of cloud, data and AI, Accenture is helping the public sector by blending human ingenuity, technology and a delivery-focused culture to turn their ambitions into action. Be ready for any challenge by adopting a continuous reinvention mindset to deliver human-centric services that adapt and grow with your needs. Contact the team at Accenture to find out more.
I would have to give Copilot a massive shout out here, because that is an example.
I don't use it very often.
So this is the Copilot for Microsoft, which is making everyone work smarter, more effective. A lot of people ourselves have deployed this. Actually, our leadership team, our main leadership team in Ireland, have gone through really detailed training on it, because once again, if my leaders aren't using Copilot, why should I? If I'm not using it as a search engine.
Or maybe they don't even know how you could use it.
Exactly. But now you see people are taking minutes from it.
So has that been a big change in Accenture this time around with Copilot?
Because it's not going, sometimes we get introduced to every technology. Everything known to man, we get to hear about.
You must get a bit jaded then,
But then I think that's what made me sceptical, to be honest, about Gen AI at the start. But now I see it's going nowhere. But Copilot actually is really beneficial. It can help your day. And that's why I think it's easier to sell to clients. But it's that infrastructure you need to have in place to be able to deploy it. You need to have Microsoft. You need the champions that we talked about previously are really good for rolling out Copilot, because if you think about it, the higher you go up in an organisation, sometimes it's harder to ask for help and say, I don't understand this technology. Where I think Copilot, getting them on board and understanding it, then it just cascades down.
We had the same conversation, which I didn't even think of applying it this way. We spoke to FIT, which is Fast Track into Technology, which is apprenticeships. And they were saying that the kind of question somebody will ask of AI to help them solve a problem or not, basically, they don't hide behind pretending they know the information because they don't care. Who cares what... I might care what you think about me asking a stupid question, but I don't care about AI.
And AI really helps with that psychological safety, which is a massive trend now for employees to feel that safety in work, to thrive and to learn. Where now there's no such thing, we always say there's no such thing as a stupid question, but now you can answer it privately through your ChatGPT or Copilot to be able to find things. Like I know someone who uses Copilot to type in, what emails have I not replied to today? Like, so practical.
That's a very, very practical application.
But that's what I mean. It's not scary. It's tailored to how you work. If you don't really read emails, you prefer to read the Teams chats, then you use it for then. If you only read email and don't do your team chats, you do vice versa. So
that's a great one for the overwhelming amount of communications that you're getting, actually, because I mean the volume of communications that people are getting, particularly in bigger organisations like Accenture. I mean, it's a maelstrom of emails, messages.
Yeah, we've actually there was a massive issues with that, where now they send us an email called "Good Morning Accenture," where they streamline our comms for us into one email, because we were getting too many. Like that saturation I was talking about previously. The fatigue. How do you know what's important? How do you decipher? And I think that comms element and having it into one is really important.
And where did agentic AI come from?
So it's just the next generation. I think it's the way we've evolved through all of the others. Now I think it's that more. Some companies are really confident in generative AI. For example, in Ireland, we've a lot of 8 of the top 10 global IT companies have presence in Ireland. But interestingly, 58% of those companies' employees have access to Gen AI tools, compared to only 38% of the local Irish.
Okay, that's a massive difference.
So you can see where the appetite for transformation is happening with Gen AI. But this is where the productivity and the synergies will happen, where it's now just evolving, but it comes to trust. Agentic AI could be further down the line for some people. Right now, you just need to get them understanding what it means in relation to your workforce, what kind of skills, doing a skills assessment as a basic.
In fact, that is a good question for me to ask is, if you were going along the road and you said, okay, right, I want everybody within the organisation to be, you know, Gen AI or Copilot, whatever, generative AI, educated or trained or skilled, well, how would you approach it?
Well, first of all, I alluded to the last time, there is the AI EU Literacy Act that's applicable for everyone in the European Union. And thankfully, it has a literacy element to it, which means all companies have to deploy some kind of AI literacy. So that's coming from the top down again.
It's a requirement.
It's a requirement. So I think that also helps. If you think at the EU level, then at the government level, they are saying it matters.
And how would they, let's say they've committed, they know that matters, they want to do it tomorrow. What would you suggest?
So one thing they say in the programme of government is they want better online services for citizens. So that as even a message to feed back into the public sector to know it's happening, that's another pressure point in. And then when it comes to skills, the first thing I'd always say is identify the willing and, you know, who want to get involved. I can think of a few people in my own company in Accenture that genuinely get excited with AI. They live and breathe it inside and outside of work. They're the ambassadors that you need to be able to articulate it. The first thing is understanding what it means for the organisation. So go back to basics. Let's understand what it means. Let's share that. And then let's do an evaluation of what kind of skills we have and what do we need. And therefore, the skills, the gaps that we have, what are the training journeys? Now, these learning, training experience need to be hyper tailored.
Yes.
But as I said, I wouldn't be panicking. For the most part, there's the hardcore changes might be AI, data engineers, you know, those people. But for the most part, if you could just get people feeling confident to use AI, then it's the learning and playing with it that gives more confidence to go again. So I wouldn't say it's terrifying, but there is a massive ethical element as well to understand the ethical considerations and responsible AI. I think only like 3% of people have deployed responsible AI against their systems.
Before we get into ethical, because that's really an important question that I want to ask you about. If I hear over and over again, find the biggest pain point within the organisation.
Yeah.
So do you think that's a good approach? I think you referred to that or inferred. So, for example, look, we have a big problem with, let's imagine, accused of people for the following. Or there's a big backlog. Let's try and apply it there. Would you think that's a good approach?
I would think that's a good approach for two things. First of all, back to storytelling. It's a great story if you can solve a pain point that everyone's caring about, because the technology will get credibility then. And you've got a purpose. So if you're saying try this for what? Just to give it a go. If you're saying trying it because we need to get this down to 10%, because, you know, consumers or patients are not happy, you've got a compelling case to try it. So I would say it's easier to apply it in a real life situation. And especially in those situations where data, because obviously health and public sector is full of data. So this is where Gen AI specialises. How can I help you do research? How can I help you turn tasks that take an hour or two into shorter time? Even if you look at a doctor, Gen AI could save a doctor 5 hours a week because they're not doing
which is a major
the admin.
problem.
Or for example, another really interesting one is call centre agents. So, you know, I often ring my health insurance provider to ask a question or two, or maybe if I have a health concern. Now Gen AI is populating what I'm saying for the agent. It's prompting the agent to ask me more questions. But in turn, I'm getting more of a customer service because the call agent is being more empathetic to me, is listening, because they're not frantically typing. It's a whole different level of customer experience now we will be getting through Gen AI.
And let's go back to the ethical. How do public sector organisations do this ethically and manage it?
Well, as I said, the trust gap is a huge problem. So first of all, I would say everyone just needs to understand what they're doing. And then they need to go in and look at the ethical considerations to make sure that they're protected. They've got policies to do it. They understand what the systems can do. But they also understand the potential risks with AI. For example, bias. I'm sure you've heard the stories where chatbots, a human turned a chatbot into not a nice person by saying not nice things. There is uncertainty with what's coming through. So people need to understand the power of it, but its limitations and how they address it. But I would say bringing people along the journey it should be an ethical consideration. So I could be in a company for 30 years. I could be there for 3 months. I need to be brought on the same journey, but in a different way. And it's so real because in 3 years, the graduates will be fully Gen AI native.
Yeah.
And they're going to expect all their working environments to be Gen AI enabled. And if they're not, how will the public sector attract and retain amazing talent?
And in terms of the future,
Yeah.
okay, it would be really remiss of me not to finish this conversation about the future. What do you think is coming down the track? What would a public sector organisation, do you think, look like when it has really embraced Gen AI?
Well, look, let's talk about the art of the possible. I would like to think that there will be a massive reduction in mundane admin jobs. I would like to think that the service that it's providing is second to none. If we think about it, what would self-serve look like with online? We talked about the idea even in healthcare of virtual wards.
By the way, just in case you didn't know, one of our shortlisted entries for the health and telemedicine was a virtual ward.
Oh, I love it.
And the awards are opening up in the next couple of weeks, again, for this year, for 2025. So, sorry, I just digressed, but I thought I'd tell people that.
But that's just something of the art of the possible. So
Yeah.
as a citizen now, I'll be able to apply for my documents. I'll be able to self-serve. I'll get better customer experience.
And the virtual ward, just explain to me what that was, because you think, this is my head, anything that's a ward means you're very sick.
Yeah.
So why would you have a virtual ward?
Well, I guess it's this is just once again talking about what we're exploring with healthcare providers is that you might need assistance, but you mightn't be critically ill.
Okay.
So we know that there's a massive shortage of beds and they're under a lot of demand. So if you're able to look at the surge of demand and go, well, who could we put in a virtual ward for whatever reason? They're still minded and looked after. But this concept, and I think it's that power of understanding that agents and all these people can help you with it, but that could be the future. Even if you look at Gen AI helping hospitals,
Nursing
with their
homes, I'm guessing.
with their space.
Yeah.
How do you optimize your space? But employee experience should go through the roof in the health and public sector. If you're a doctor, for example, we talked about a radiologist, if they're getting tools that help them or reassure them in what they are doing or what they are saying. Diagnosis. Imagine how cool it will be when Gen AI is quickly going through reams and reams of data to help a diagnosis for people. On a more practical level, we're seeing the idea of robots going in and helping survey public infrastructure. Like, that is kind of crazy to think this could be the art of the possible, where the customer experience is second to none. People are working on high purpose. They're feeling valued.
I remember there was our winner last year was the Fingal County Council, and what they did was they took Balbriggan, which is a whole new kind of redevelopment of Balbriggan, and they turned it into a 3D experience.
Wow.
And they found that the engagement and the number of people who were anti it, if you like, and I'm simplifying it, was dramatically changed because of the fact that people could actually feel what experience it was going to be like.
Yeah.
It was going to be a very positive experience.
Yeah.
And so that's small human emotions that are able to respond to something in a way that's more real, rather than, as I said earlier, if you don't know something, you tend to think on the negative side.
Yeah.
Whereas this is kind of giving you a positive, real interpretation of what Balbriggan was going to look like.
Yeah.
But in terms of, the fun parts, do you think that there's going to be kind of more gamification, more interesting ways of dealing with problems in the workplace?
Yeah. Well, these skills that I'm talking about, the fusion skills, will allow that sector to work faster, but more productive. So the uptake in productivity will be double of what people are doing. And I do think it's a sector that obviously gets a hard time because of everything, the pressures it's under, the budget constraints and everything. So all of this is going to ignite it, I think, and give it a chance to properly reinvent itself. So what are all these parts of the public health and public sector? How can they reinvent themselves as well with this? It gives everyone a chance to look in the mirror and go, what do I want to be? And what do people need me to be as a consumer or a patient or a citizen? And I would think we talked about generative AI being, 3 months ago? Now it's agentic AI. I could be on this with you in another 6 months.
Isn't it? I mean, that is one of the challenges. It's
fast.
the speed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why we're all on the train, but it's like where we're getting on and how we stay on it and keep going with it. But I would say go calmly with it. You need to understand it and the powers with the leaders. But I would say investing in change and understanding it and understanding that this machine only works with people. It learns from people. I think that is
That's a
should
perfect
reassure
note, Wendy,
anyone.
to finish on. This begins and ends with people, everybody.
It is, yeah.
One way or the other. Well, look, thank you so much for your brilliant insights, and it's been really enjoyable. So everybody, please, obviously, listen to part 1 as well, because it's it leads into this part. And before we go, firstly, thank you to you, Wendy, for
You're
coming.
very welcome.
And then I also want to thank the team, the wonderful team behind Transform Gov, which is studio manager Peter Rice, video editor Neil Horner, sound engineer Lee Brennan, and videographer is Louis Griffin. And finally, thank you to South Dublin Podcast Studios. We'll see you next episode.